You know who we haven't talked about in a little while? We haven't talked about Joe Rogan. He's one of these two, I think. And I saw this title while scrolling through his videos, accepting gender differences. This is one of my favorite topics to go over, okay? Because I feel like when people, not even on the right, but when people who aren't like really progressive, when they talk about this, they always slip in the funniest conclusions alongside a bunch of conclusions that everyone agrees with, you know? Like, basically what'll happen is they'll be like, and what lefties can't understand is that, like, with your man and women, like, they tend to be different levels of physical strength. And then the other guest will be like, yeah, lefties just they don't acknowledge that. They think that all men and women are equally strong. And then the first guy will be like, yeah, and lefties, they don't seem to realize that, like, there are physical differences between men and women. And then the other person's like, yeah, lefties don't understand that. They think there's just one sex or something. And then the third one will come back, and then the first person will be like, yeah, and lefties, they just don't get that, like, women have smaller brains, and it means they have worse spatial reasoning. So the best way for them to focus on tasks in front of them is for them to wear horse blinders, like those things that you put on the side of your head so that you don't get distracted by your peripheral vision. That's just something that women like, you know? And then the guest will be like, yeah, lefties just don't understand. Like, so I love the discourse on this because I feel like we oscillate so rapidly between, like, sane and insane talking points. But let's go 6 minutes. How much can we fit in here?
The Joe Rogan Experience.
It's a strange time when it comes to the.
Hey, look, Vosh, poison the well. Whoa! Hold on. See, we've recently learned some terms we don't know the definitions of. Poisoning the well is not me saying this is a thing that tends to happen, and I'm curious to see if it happens here. Maybe it won't happen here. I don't pre-watch videos before going over them on stream, you know? Actually commenting at all on anything anybody does is poisoning the well. Here, let's roll it.
The reality of the differences between genders. It's a very strange time because it doesn't like no one's ever said like men are better than women or women are better than men. We're just.
Hold on. I have heard some people say at least one of those things. I have heard people say that men are better. Well, hold on. Usually when people say men are better than women, they do it the same way that, like, racist people will describe race realism. Have you ever heard, like, the way, like, some race realists will talk about how all races are different but not better or worse, you know? They'll be like, oh, I don't believe that white people are better. We all have our own, like, goals and skills. I think that white people are better at mathematics, engineering, civilization building, higher reasoning, logic, forming relationships. And I think that black people are better at, like, I think they can jump higher? Yeah. So we're all just different, you know? But we're not, like, better or worse. It's such an incredibly cowardly argument. Like, they know, you know, they're inferring, like, like, meaningful improvement there, but they're not saying it because it's easier to attack them that way. The people do the same thing with men and women too. Like, oh yeah, men and women are different. Did you see the TPUSA conference that I drunkenly covered with Shoe on Head? Where Charlie Kirk went up there, and he's like, men and women are different, you know, not better or worse, but different, and that's why us men, you know, we're better at this and that. That's why we're in charge of everything in society. And women, I don't know, they could do your elementary school teachers. Like, yeah, empathy, you know, like stuff like, it's like, all right, okay. Anyway, let's roll, Joe Rogan.
Different things, and transgender people are different as well. We're all just different. We should be accepting of each other and loving of each other and give each other equal rights and laws and respect. But when it comes to athletics, there's a reason why men don't compete against women. And I had this bizarre conversation with this guy once who has this TV show where he kind of debunks things. But when I got him alone to talk about
this, is Adam Ruins Everything. He's referring to Adam Conover? Conover, right? Conover.
These things, like, without a team of writers, when you leave someone to just their opinions, and he had these sort of very progressive talking points that he would kind of blurt out. But then when I started challenging him on these and going deep, you realize, like, he didn't even really think about this. He just.
So I do think, if I remember correctly, that Adam's performance on Joe Rogan wasn't amazing. I can't attest to Adam's personal beliefs, only the stuff produced in his show, but the nuances of the whole like trans women in women's sports thing are fairly scientific and fairly involved. And yeah, I think Adam said he wasn't ready for that topic or something. But the problem is like people on the right, can I include Joe in on this issue, he's with the right, are so horny to talk about trans women in women's sports. They're so horny to talk about it, like all the time. That's all they want to talk about at all. Like, the America could be like sinking into the ocean from climate change, like the sea levels rising, and we'll all be like crowded together on like New Mexico or whichever state has the highest average elevation, and like we'll be talking about like, okay, so like how do we distribute blankets in the war shelters? And then like a conservative will walk up to me and they'll be like, well, so first of all, our debate from 42 years ago, not finished. So trans women aren't like, they're so obsessed with talking about it. And I think the reason why is because it's a very like unintuitive position, you know? It's a really, really unintuitive position. The thing that a lot of people don't understand is that sports are inherently unfair because you're always going to be fighting against your genetic limits, even within your own sex, you know? Like Michael Phelps and I are both men, but Michael Phelps is like half fish genetically, and I'm not. I could train every day of my life for the rest of my life. I could have trained every day since I was 6 years old, and I would be a fraction of what Michael Phelps can be in the water. And the reason for that is because there is a lot of genetic variance within people. So the question is the average genetic skill variance between men and women great enough that they should be separated into separate like brackets for most contact sports? And the answer for that, to me, in almost every case is probably yeah, because if you integrated them, men would always be on top in every category, and there would never be a woman's gold medalist, like for any physical sport that involved contact or that involved like strength-based activities, because just generally speaking, men are better at that sort of thing. That's not like a hard statement on like one sex being better than the other, because let's be real, physical strength is worthless in modern society, okay? With automation growing more and more prominent, the extent to which society relies on people being physically strong is decreasing massively. If we're talking about what's useful to society, we're mostly talking about long-term thinking, critical thinking, multitasking, and social organization. Those are the skills that like really, really drive the modern day world, you know? Not totally irrelevant. Like we have construction workers and stuff, but there will always be people who can do construction work, you know? The world is mostly driven forward by social skills and critical thinking these days. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm rambling about this, but the point that I'm trying to get at here is that it's a complicated subject and there aren't really any hard or easy answers. But the truth is, and a lot of people on the right won't accept this, the truth is that if a trans woman has transitioned medically for a certain length of time, their body does undergo very significant physiological changes that do make them inferior to, in athletic activities to what they would have been before their transition. Everything from like muscle strength and density to like their bones to their like energy levels, all of it gets affected by the process of transitioning. And if any of you have ever like seen a trans woman in real life, was this a person who could like choke slam you to the ground? Generally not. Usually they're, with all respect, usually they're quite weak physically. You know, no hate. It's just been my experience. Yes, I'm sure some of you would like that. And there are very strong trans women, of course. There are some extraordinarily strong trans women. But there are changes that are made. I just wish people would have this conversation in good faith rather than acting like it's literally just like guys lying about being women to do sports against women. Because that doesn't seem to be a problem like anywhere, you know? The real question is the amount the transitioning affects trans women's physiology sufficient for them to be fairly placed in women's athletic brackets? And that's a way more complicated issue. So, yeah, okay, I'm totally rambling here. It's just
wanted to appear that he was progressive, which I am. I am a progressive person. I know I look like a meathead, but I'm very progressive.
Yeah.
I just look at reality, though. I grew up with martial arts and with fighting, and I know there's a fucking radical difference between males and females. It's
Again, this is the thing. This is the ignoring reality that bothers me a little bit. The question is not, are men and women on average different levels of strength? I'm not even commenting on the final question here. I'm just saying the framing here is just factually not correct. The framing here should be, is the transition sufficient? Not, are men and women different? We know men and women are different. We know why there are different brackets in sports.
It's radical. It's not small. It's not subtle. It's radical.
You mean in physical strength, or do you also mean in
physical strength and violence and
Goodbye,
psychology
Yes.
and attitude and in competitiveness? It's radical. There's a radical difference.
Radical.
And also, there's a spectrum. And some people are far more feminine than they are masculine, and they happen to have penises. And some women are far more masculine than they are feminine, and they have to have vaginas.
That's
but
true.
But it doesn't change the norm. It doesn't change, and it certainly doesn't change.
That's true. It doesn't change the norm, but you don't always look to statistical averages when looking at an individual. Is my chat just like totally dead? Oh God, I think it is. Oh, hello. Oh, rebooting the server. All right. Don't worry, folks. He'll be back soon.
Change on the high ends of these spectrums.
That's
when you
right.
look at the high ends of these spectrums, so ultra female versus ultra male, you're looking at two radically different things.
Yeah. And I really like what you said about.
I'm looking at Twitch
getting emotional again. I like what you said about just accepting and understanding each other.
Yes.
That, to me, you don't have to accept bad behavior. You don't have to accept hurtful behavior, but it does help us to really work hard to understand it. So, and those are the extremes of behavior. But you're right, we're different. And I think it's interesting and it's exciting the way that we're different, the ways that we're different. And testosterone really does help to explain so many of those differences. So understanding that hormone.
Oh, we're doing it again. Okay. You can make the argument that there are differences between men and women. Okay, wait. I need to go on a little bit of a rant for a second, if I can. Okay, this is something that's going to vary significantly depending on your life experiences, and I completely understand if like this isn't a ubiquitous like experience for everyone. But while I completely accept that like cis men and cis women are very, very different, like you have to recognize that the process of transitioning has a massive effect on the bodies and on the personalities of people who transition. Like trans women aren't just like you have like a marble block shaped like a guy and then you just sort of like shave it down into a feminine shape and then you have that. Like the differences, like if you talk with them sometimes, not just differences in like stuff like how soft their skin is, and apparently just having estrogen makes your skin softer, which seems kind of unfair, like for me, but whatever. And like body hair, but not just stuff like that, like personality changes, like your mood. It's a whole other puberty. Like it radically changes like everything. If I had chat here with me, they would agree with me. I don't have Twitch or YouTube chat integrated onto the OBS change, but there is such a huge change. And man, have you ever like seen how beefy trans men can get? Like you've seen it, right? I'm sure somewhere on Twitter, you've seen some lefty Twitter post, and it's like, this is a real man, and it's like they're a trans guy, and they look like a tank. You know what I mean? The differences here are significant, very, very, very significant. In fact, I would go so far as to say that for a lot of people who transition, a lot of trans people, the physiological changes that they go through are so significant, assuming they're able to keep up with their hormone intake, that I think that like biologically they're like way, way, way closer to their presented gender than they are towards the sex that they were like born into. I really do believe that, like, because I've met like some trans guys, you know, like and shook their hands in person, and these are like big, like veiny, like hairy armed, like square jaw, furrowed brow, like beard, like muscles and veins, and like significantly more masculine than I am, you know? That's not just an aesthetic change. There have to be a lot of like underlying changes to how their body works for that to even be possible for a person assigned female at birth, and vice versa for trans women. So again, I'm not making any hard prescriptive statements here. It just frustrates me when people try to boil down like the whole trans thing to like, well, men and women are different. Well, we know men and women are different, but there's a lot of complexity to this stuff, you know?
Helps us understand each other. And it helped me, even though I have been teaching about this stuff for ages, writing the book and especially reading about the transgender experiences helped me to have sort of this epiphany. So you can see how emotional I am, right? I'm like ultra emotional. Mm-hmm. My husband is a British philosopher, and he is not. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't really express a huge range of emotion. He's a wonderful guy, and I love him. But I've always kind of picked on him and thought there was something wrong with him for not being more emotional, not being able to have these long conversations about emotions. And
this might be more to do with him being British than him being a guy, by the way.
And psychology and what happened in his childhood to make him like that. And I have a temper. He doesn't have a temper. I cry during lecture and cry at home and, can barely control that. My epiphany was, I'm not better than he is because I'm so in touch with my emotions. I have issues. Like he probably has issues too, but he doesn't have to come to be closer to me in my way of being in the world. I need to work on accepting who he is. He's an awesome guy. And I was always trying to get him to be more like me. And I think women really want men, if they're in heterosexual relationships, to be more like them emotionally. But I had this epiphany, like, no, it's working out. And our marriage would be better if I just shut up about some of the getting him to be more emotional all the time.
Okay, this feels like more of a therapy session. I don't necessarily know how to comment on it. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to to anyone's life or experiences here. Also, I think YouTube is telling me that they don't like me looking at this Joe Rogan clip. I'm a little bit concerned about that. They've told me that they don't like me looking at it. I wonder if not having chat on screen decreases the visual dissimilarity, and that makes it more likely for YouTube to throw up the red flag at you. Wait. Oh, I hate streaming on YouTube sometimes. I feel like we got the gist of this though, right? Like, the funny thing is what she's describing right now, like being more emotional, like being more of a woman thing. I don't know, trans women cry a lot too, right? Like in my experience, they also tend to be pretty emotional. It is a hormonal thing, right? It's just, I don't know what this conversation has to do with trans people. The conversation on like there are differences between men and women is not the same conversation as like, to what extent does gender transition influence your ability to participate in sports of the opposite birth sex, I guess. Wacky stuff, that. And for anyone who's wondering what my actual opinions and positions are in this, I've read so much literature on this. It seems like in most cases, if you're assigned male at birth, but you're a trans woman and you transition, and it's been a few years since you transition, it seems to be that there is a small but significant average difference in your physical ability that slightly elevates you, on average, above cis women, assuming that you transitioned after your male puberty, because you benefited from the androgen sensitivity that you experienced while undergoing a male puberty, something that cis women would have never had the chance to experience. It's a small difference, and it only functions out on averages, so there are exceptions in both directions. Most of the, like, sometimes you'll see photos of, like, trans women competing next to cis women in, like, high school, and the trans women are, like, way more muscular. That's usually because they haven't had much time to transition. Obviously, that has an effect on their physiology and the extent to which their physiology, with all due respect, degrades from transition, because it's a lot harder to keep muscle up when you're taking estrogen shots, I bet. Now, one thing that I have not seen is any evidence at all that trans women outperform cis women on average if the trans women took puberty blockers before they experienced a male puberty. So if it was like an 11-year-old trans girl or like gender undecided person, and they took hormone blockers for a time, and then later they transitioned and they never experienced male puberty, that person I don't think would have any meaningful average advantages, except for maybe a slightly different bone structure, which may be beneficial, but I think it's fairly marginal at that point. That's my understanding from what I've read, but there's so much literature out in it, and it's such like a new point of concern, and it's tough to say. It is.